What does the word professional mean to you as either an adjective or a noun? I've had occasion in the last couple of years to get into some really nasty disputes with some people of differing opinions over what it means to be a professional and what it means to look and act professional. The fact is, people can define those words a little bit differently. I would say when it comes to the word professional, the simplest definition, the one that I would assign to it, what it means to me, it is a person who has learned his business very well and is very good at his business. And I think that's the simplest and most acceptable definition of professional. Now, there are professions that have well-defined standards: medicine, law, accounting, architecture, and so forth. So there are those professions. There are other professions where the term professional can be defined somewhat differently. What is a professional anyway? Well, there has been a traditional definition that a professional person was a person who went and got a 4-year degree and studied a particular field, and then they got into that field. Do I agree with that? No, I don't. A lot of people can be qualified as professionals who have not taken that particular educational track. A very good truck driver is a professional. He not only went to school and got his license, but then beyond that, he went to a company training program. And then as a truck driver, you never stop learning. And the ones who are very good at it, the ones who have the great safety records, who deliver on time, they certainly are professionals. People who work in the maritime industry are professionals. An extremely good deckhand is a professional. He didn't necessarily go to school. He might have, but he went through a learning process and developed a lot of knowledge and became very good at what he does. And that's the definition of professional when it comes to a deckhand. And then there are ranks that a person can move up in the maritime industry, and I'm not referring to the Navy or the Coast Guard or anything like that necessarily, but I'm referring to merchant marine, yacht charters, cruise ships, and so forth. There are various levels of that profession, and a person can start out as a deckhand and then move up to some kind of mate, and then maybe eventually a bosun or a boatswain, and then possibly eventually a first officer, and then the pinnacle of that profession is captain. Some of those people get college degrees in maritime science and in the maritime business. Others don't do that at all. They simply work their way up through the ranks, but however they get there, they are definitely a professional. A communications professional, a communication, somebody who's a very good communicator is a professional. An actor may or may not have taken formal drama training. I don't think most of them do. I think most of them simply get there through auditions. But if they're very good at what they do, they are a professional. A painter who learns to paint like Bob Ross would definitely be a professional. It doesn't matter if he went to school, doesn't matter if he learned on his own. You know, the TV chefs like Gordon Ramsay and Robert Irvine and Jamie Oliver and Bobby Flay and some of those people, they are professionals. I think some of them did go to specialized schools and picked up their profession that way, but they are definitely professionals. I think others just work their way up. I don't know if Anthony Bourdain went to a school or not, but he's definitely an extremely good chef, although he does some things that I wouldn't necessarily do, but he's a professional. As far as I'm concerned, any kind of master craftsman is a professional. And so, a person who has learned his business well and he's very competent and very good at it in his at what he does is a professional, as far as I'm concerned. Now, there are different ways that you can be professional. In the maritime industry, it's pretty common for officers and captains to go around cursing and swearing. I mean, it's just part of the tradition. That's part of their profession. And other occupations, well, you wouldn't find lawyers cursing and swearing in court necessarily. That might get them into a little bit of trouble. Then there are bankers, and it really doesn't matter if they got a finance degree or something similar, or if they started out as a bank teller and just kind of worked their way up to the head of that. They're still a professional. As I say, a professional is someone who has taken a lot of effort, time and effort to learn and develop skills and learn what he does, and then he or she is very good at it. And that is simply what a professional is. Now, A lot of times there are people who will like to criticize other people as unprofessional. But a lot of times that happens in industries and businesses where the professional standards are not necessarily defined the way this critic wants them to be defined. Because once you get beyond this fact that a person is a professional who knows his business well and is very good at his business, then there can be very subjective definitions as to what professional can be. What is a professional email? What does a professional conference call sound like? That can differ a lot depending on the setting, and it can differ as far as what individual opinions are. But I'd like to give you a situation that I thought was extremely unprofessional, and I witnessed it myself. There was this organization who was involved with promoting and selling a product that was being sold through a federal government website, and I'm trying not to tip my hand, but you might already be guessing what it is. But I need to explain the story and tell you what happened. And they went to a meeting in the state capitol, and this one particular organization was set to give a presentation on this particular group of products that were being promoted through the government website. And they were going to be in front of an audience of about 100 people, and they were going to give a sort of tag team presentation. Well, and I was there, I did see this, the majority of the people in this crowd were dressed in sort of a business formal, not formal in the sense of tuxedos and such, but you had a lot of people in suits and ties and dresses and just sort of dressed to the nines in a business fashion. But this particular group, the group that was going to give the presentations, they show up in these in this semi-formal crowd of people who were going to be presenting, and this group had a lot to present. This one group, this one organization showed up in these stupid ass t-shirts with a name called the Pride Team or some idiotic something like that. And when it came time to be introduced to the crowd and do their presentations in front of this business attire people, they start dancing up to the podium, doing this idiotic, stupid dance, singing this song called "I Need Just a Little More Product," and I'm not going to tell you what the product was, but "I need just a little more product," and they're dancing around, and they got these stupid-ass t-shirts on, and they just look like a bunch of fools, and in no sense professional. In this particular meeting, they should have shown up with at least button-down shirts, casual pants, black socks, dress shoes, and at least a sort of office casual attire, but they didn't do that. They showed up in these damn t-shirts, and when it came time to be introduced and start their presentation, they had to do this silly little stupid dance. I need just a little more product and all this garbage. And then they get up and they did reasonably good presentations, but they just looked like fools in the way they presented themselves. And I just couldn't believe that happened. Now, unfortunately, I knew this organization quite well. As a matter of fact, I was well acquainted with the inner workings of the organization. And the department from that organization that went to this conference to give these presentations was essentially a waste of space. And I thought they did more damage to that organization than they did good. This department was intended to provide a lot of cheap-ass public relations, because apparently the media didn't like this organization very much, and so in order to promote their organization, they had people running around in the community trying to form partnerships and linkages and have idiotic events where they would distribute bottled water and crackers, and have events with the housing authority and events with the community action agency, and get other organizations to kind of help them in kind and give them free stuff, and the whole department was just a waste of space. Well, this idiotic presentation done in front of this group of semi-formal people was the brainchild of the department manager, and I'll tell you what, if I'd been the head of that organization, this idiotic department manager had gone down there and made fools out of our organization like that, I would have called her into the office and said, I think your whole department's pretty much a waste of space anyway. You embarrassed the hell out of us. That is not going to happen again. You are not going to do that to this organization. And frankly, I don't think we got a place for you here. Now, the members of your department, they're going to be called in, and we're going to find out what they're working on, and we're going to meet with them and see if we can find a place for them. But quite frankly, I think your whole department is a waste of space. You are laid off effective immediately. If you'll go with Mr. Jones, and we're considering you redundant, the whole department might end up redundant, but if you'll just go with Mr. Jones here back to HR, he will help you apply for unemployment because you were laid off effective immediately. And we'll call the rest of your department in for meetings and figure out where we're going to go from there. But since this wasn't necessarily their fault, it was more or less your fault, we don't have a place for you here because you just don't fit into the culture. And then we would have gotten rid of that person and then figured out what to do with the rest of the people later who were probably kind of forced into doing this stupid presentation. Because I think what that group did was exceedingly unprofessional given the context. When you want to talk about professionalism, you have to consider the context. It was not appropriate to go down there dressed the way they were in front of these people with suits and ties and do a silly dance and sing a silly song and have this stupid Pride Team t-shirts on. That was totally inappropriate. But then again, as I said, professionalism can depend on your context. And in this context, they were absolutely awful. But I can't emphasize this enough. Professionalism depends on context. There are some professional contexts, lawyers in court, bankers, and some other people, where you need to dress somewhat formally. And so I recognize that, and fine, an attorney in court needs to wear a suit and tie and be dressed in a semi-formal way. A banker, probably the same thing, although I think standards may be a little bit too strict there. Doctors need to dress in they need to look and act and talk like doctors, but in a lot of businesses, it's really, professionalism can be a matter of opinion. I don't think professionalism necessarily involves politically correct speech all the time. I worked for a company one time who, when the discussion of layoffs came up, they said, we do not terminate people, we dismiss people. Got to be politically correct and all. And so I thought that was kind of ridiculous. I'm not a big fan of political correctness in speech. But professionalism can vary. You don't necessarily, as long as you're good at what you do, you know what you're doing, you're committed to it, and you're do a good job, if there are not strictly defined standards in your profession, then there is a lot of latitude for how you can operate. And beyond that business of knowing what you do and being good at what you do, then opinions about professionalism can vary a lot, and it can depend on the corporate culture, and corporate cultures can vary. And so, outside of law, medicine, accountancy, architecture, maybe engineering, I'm not too sure about that one, but outside of strictly defined protocols, then opinions can vary widely on what professionalism is. If you're an attorney, by all means dress up in that suit and tie and speak respectfully. If you're a doctor, look and talk like a doctor. But if you work in a specialized air freight cargo office that is fairly isolated and has very few visitors, then we don't have to be super strict about the way we talk and the way we dress or the way we write our emails, as long as we communicate with them clearly. To a certain extent, in many businesses, in many operations, professionalism is a matter of opinion. The most important thing is that you know your business very well, you do it well, and you're committed to it. And for the most part, that's what professionalism means to me. So, what does it mean to you? I think you ought to consider my definition, because I think it's a pretty good definition. Thanks, and have a great day.